As China woos the Taliban, Uyghurs in Afghanistan fear for their lives now. As the Taliban exerts control over the country, she fears she and other ethnic Uyghurs could be sent back to China by members of the militant group keen to curry favor with Beijing, which has been accused of carrying out a genocide on the Muslim minority.Tuhan, who is using a pseudonym to protect her identity from the Taliban, is caught between a homeland where Uyghurs are facing increasing repression and an adopted country where they are considered outsiders.
What worries them most is that they could be deported to China. Over the past few years, the Chinese government has escalated its security and religious crackdown in Xinjiang. Up to 2 million Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities are believed to have passed through a sprawling network of detention centers across the region, according to the US State Department. Former detainees allege they were subjected to intense political indoctrination, forced labor, torture, and even sexual abuse. China vehemently denies allegations of human rights abuses, insisting the camps are voluntary vocational training centers designed to stamp out religious extremism and terrorism.
Tuhan said she fears what will happen to her and her family if they're forced to return. All these past years, life was difficult. But what is happening now is the worst, she said, referring to the Taliban takeover. It is just a matter of time before find out that we are Uyghurs. Our lives are in danger. China refugee Tuhan was just 7 years old when she and her parents fled Yarkand, an oasis on the ancient Silk Road near the Chinese border with Afghanistan.
Tuhan is one of up to 3,000 Uyghurs in Afghanistan, according to Sean Roberts, a professor at George Washington University and author of The War on the Uyghurs, making them a tiny minority in the country of more than 37 million. Abdulaziz Nasseri, whose parents fled Xinjiang in 1976, said his ID still identifies him as a China refugee even though he was born in Kabul. Nasseri, who now lives in Turkey, said he has collected the names of more than 100 Uyghur families who want to flee Afghanistan. They are afraid from China, because the Taliban was dealing with China behind the door. And they are afraid to send back to China, he said. A good friend, there's reason for Uyghurs in Afghanistan to be worried, say experts. In July, a Taliban delegation paid a high-profile visit to Tianjin, where they met with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. Wang called the Taliban an important military and political force in Afghanistan and declared that they would play an important role in the country's peace, reconciliation and reconstruction process. In return, the Taliban called China a good friend and pledged to never allow any forces to use the Afghan territory to engage in acts detrimental to China, according to a statement from the Chinese Foreign Ministry on the meeting. And last week, the Taliban spokesperson called for closer relations with Beijing in an interview with Chinese state broadcaster CGTN. China is a very important and strong country in our neighborhood, and we have had very positive and good relations with China in the past, Zabihullah Mujahid said. We want to make these relations even stronger and want to improve the mutual trust level. Roberts said Uyghurs fears the Taliban could deport them to China to gain more favor with Beijing will legitimate have a lot of reasons to try to ingratiate Beijing in terms of gaining international recognition, in terms of getting financial assistance at the time when most of the international community is not giving them financial assistance, he said. Tuhan's concern over potentially being forced to return to China is deepened by Beijing's increasingly aggressive efforts in recent years to bring overseas Uyghurs back to Xinjiang, including from Muslim countries. In a report published in June, the Uyghur Human Rights Project said there were at least 395 cases of Uyghurs being deported, extradited, or rendered back to China from countries across the world since 1997. The so-called data and reports released by them have no impartiality and credibility, and are not worth refuting at all, it said. Cracking down on militants. The Chinese government has a long history of engaging with the Taliban, dating back to the late 1990s, when the militant group last controlled Afghanistan. Beijing has repeatedly urged the Taliban to crack down on Uyghur militants in Afghanistan, primarily the East Turkestan Islamic movement, which it has blamed for almost every terror attack or violent incident in Xinjiang and other parts of the country. During his July meeting with Taliban officials in Tianjin, Wang, the Chinese foreign minister, said Eastern Time imposes a direct threat to China's state security and territory integrity. A video released by state broadcaster CGTN in 2019 compared the Eastern Time to Al-Qaeda and ISIS, saying it has attempted to recruit people on a massive scale, spreading a radical ideology that continues to cause chaos in many countries around the world. Eastern Time started as a small group of Uyghurs who came to Taliban-ruled Afghanistan in 1998 with the intent to establish an insurgency against Chinese rule, according to Roberts. The Taliban initially allowed the group to settle in Afghanistan, but in an attempt to seek Chinese support amid international isolation, the Taliban assured Beijing that it would not allow any group to use its territory to conduct attacks against China. In the 1990s and 2000s, Xinjiang saw a rise in violent attacks, which Roberts said were often spontaneous outbursts of grievances toward the Chinese government's repressive policies. But after the 9/11 attacks, Beijing tried to reframe all those incidents as being related to Islamic terrorism directed by external groups such as Eastern Time, he said. Few people had heard of Eastern Time until it was designated by the US government as a terrorist organization in 2002, during a period of increased anti-terrorism cooperation with China in the wake of the 9/11 attacks. That decision, however, has been questioned by experts and officials, who see it as a quid pro quo by Washington to gain Beijing's support for the invasion of Iraq. Last year, amid worsening US-China relations, the Trump administration delisted Eastern Time as a terrorist group, drawing the ire of Beijing. The US State Department said the removal was because for more than a decade, there has been no credible evidence that Eastern Time continues to exist. Eastern Time's founder Hassan Marsum was killed in 2003 by troops in Pakistan, where he and his followers fled following the US bombing of Afghanistan. The group appears to have died with him, said Roberts.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe